Imagine yourself standing in the heart of Athens on a warm, golden afternoon. The sun hangs high in the brilliant blue sky, casting long shadows on the marble steps of the Acropolis. Around you, the city pulses with life. Traders call out their wares in the bustling agora, voices overlapping in a lively chorus of barter and negotiation. Children dart between the legs of adults, laughing and chasing one another, their joyful noise mixing with the occasional bray of donkeys or the clatter of cartwheels on stone. Philosophers walk slowly beneath olive trees, deep in conversation, their robes flowing as they gesture passionately about virtue, justice, and the nature of the universe. This is ancient Greece, or more precisely, one of its many city-states, a civilization not unified by a single ruler or government, but by a shared language, culture, and religion. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each city had its own laws, customs, and ways of life. But what truly binds them all together is the human story of families, friendships, and the mysterious forces that drive the heart, love, and desire. To understand the Greek approach to love and sexuality, we must first imagine the world they lived in. It was a place both very foreign and strikingly familiar. Their homes were simple but sturdy, built around courtyards filled with fragrant herbs and vines. The streets might be narrow and winding, but the sky above was wide and open, filled with the cries of birds and the distant bleating of goats. People worked hard, farmers tending olive groves, fishermen hauling nets from the sea, craftsmen shaping clay and bronze. Yet life also held many moments of celebration, religious festivals with music and dancing, theatrical performances that stirred the soul, and athletic contests where the finest athletes competed nude, their bodies shining with oil and sweat. In such a society, ideas about the body, love, and intimacy were woven deeply into daily life, and into their religion and art as well. Unlike many later cultures that viewed the human body with suspicion or shame, the ancient Greeks celebrated it openly. The male body especially was admired as a reflection of divine beauty and strength. Sculptors carved statues of gods and heroes in perfect proportion. Poets sang praises of the beloved's eyes, hair, and smile. Athletes competed in the nude during the Olympic Games, proud to display their disciplined, sculpted forms to thousands of spectators. But this openness about the body and about desire did not mean that everything was casual or without rules. In fact, ancient Greek society was deeply structured, and customs surrounding love and sex were carefully observed, though sometimes surprising by today's standards. The family was the foundation of Greek life. Fathers ruled their households with authority, while mothers managed the home and raised children. Sons were trained from boyhood to be citizens, warriors, and thinkers. Girls learned from their mothers how to keep the household running, to weave cloth, and to prepare for marriage. In Athens, the city famous for its democracy and philosophy, women's lives were mostly confined to the home, their public roles limited. But this was not the case everywhere. Spartan women, for instance, were known for their physical fitness, strength, and relative independence. Marriage was an important social contract. Families arranged unions to strengthen alliances, preserve property, and ensure heirs. Love could bloom within marriage, but it was often secondary to duty and social expectation. The bride would leave her family home to join her husband's household, a transition filled with ceremonies and rituals designed to bind the two families together. Yet love and desire were not confined to marriage alone. The ancient Greeks had a far more complex relationship with sexuality than simple monogamy. Men, particularly, had freedoms that allowed for relationships outside of marriage. It was common for a man to have bonds of affection and education with younger males, a practice that blended mentorship with romantic feelings, though always governed by strict social codes. At the same time, courtesans and prostitutes had their recognized place in society, offering companionship and pleasure in exchange for payment. The Greeks even had different words for love that reflected its many forms. Eros was the fiery, passionate desire that could seize the heart and mind, often seen as both a blessing and a dangerous force. Philia described the deep, loyal friendship between equals, a bond as sacred as family. Agape spoke of selfless, unconditional love, whether divine or human, transcending personal desire for the good of others. This nuanced understanding reflected their worldview. Desire was not simply physical, nor purely emotional, but a complicated dance between body, mind, and soul. It could inspire poetry and philosophy, politics and religion. Indeed, sexuality in ancient Greece was deeply connected to their gods and myths. The stories of Zeus, Aphrodite, Apollo, and Hermes are filled with tales of seduction, longing, and transformation. These divine narratives taught lessons about the power and unpredictability of love. For example, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, was both enchanting and mischievous, stirring desire wherever she went. Yet she also brought chaos and suffering when love was unwise or unbalanced. But even as the Greeks celebrated love and desire, their society was highly patriarchal. Men held political power and social authority, and women's roles were often constrained. This created tensions and contradictions in their attitudes towards sexuality. Women were idealized as chaste wives and devoted mothers, but also feared as potential sources of temptation and disorder. Men, on the other hand, were free to explore pleasures more openly, though still within socially acceptable boundaries. Public life and private life were distinct but intertwined. In the agora or marketplace, a man's reputation depended on his honor and conduct. But behind closed doors, or in the courtyards and bathhouses, human desires played out in ways that could surprise outsiders. Throughout the city, people would encounter symbols of love and fertility everywhere. Temples dedicated to Aphrodite and Eros attracted worshippers, seeking blessings in romance or childbirth. Poets composed verses praising beauty and passion. Artists painted scenes on pottery that told stories of courtship, marriage, and playful flirtation. At the same time, sexuality was a source of humor and satire. Comedic playwrights poked fun at lovers' follies, jealous husbands, and the sometimes absurd consequences of desire. Festivals like the Dionysia combined drunken revelry with theatrical performances, blurring the line between the sacred and the profane. As you wander through this ancient city, the complex tapestry of love and sexuality reveals itself, a world both governed by rules and brimming with passion, a culture that embraced the beauty of the human form while wrestling with the limits placed on individuals by society. This is the stage on which countless stories were played out. Stories of first love and heartbreak, of forbidden desire and social duty, of sacred ritual and wild celebration. In the chapters ahead, we will step deeper into this world, uncovering the myths, customs, and sometimes surprising or unusual practices that the ancient Greeks used to understand love and sexuality. We will meet the gods and mortals who shaped these ideas and explore how the Greeks navigated the challenges of desire in a world both familiar and strange. By journey's end, you will see how the ancient Greeks' embrace of love and the body still echoes in our own culture, through art, literature, philosophy, and even our everyday ideas about beauty and relationships. So take a deep breath, and step forward into a world where love is many things at once. A gift, a challenge, a mystery, and above all, a human story that has traveled through time to meet us here today. Long before marble temples crowned the hills of Greece, long before the bustling marketplaces of Athens or the fierce training grounds of Sparta, there was the world of myth, a shimmering realm where gods and goddesses walked among mortals, their lives entangled with passion, ambition, and desire. These stories were not mere fairy tales. They were the living heart of Greek culture, offering explanations for the mysteries of love, the power of attraction, and the tangled threads of human emotion. Imagine the great Mount Olympus soaring high above the clouds, a palace of gleaming marble and gold. Here dwelt the 12 Olympian gods, immortal and majestic, yet often no less complicated in their feelings and relationships than the people below. Their stories were passed down around fires, sung at festivals, and painted on pottery. Through them, the Greeks explored the endless varieties of love, from tender friendship to fiery passion, from playful flirtation to tragic heartbreak. At the head of this divine family sat Zeus, the mighty thunderer. He was the king of the gods, ruler of the sky, and lord of thunder and lightning. His presence was awe-inspiring, thick beard flowing, eyes flashing like bolts of lightning, and a voice that could shake the earth. Yet beneath this formidable exterior beat a heart full of desire. A desire that led him to countless romantic adventures, often at great cost. Zeus was married to Hera, goddess of marriage and the protector of families. She was regal, proud, and fiercely loyal, but also known for her jealous wrath. Zeus's many affairs tested her patience and sometimes provoked storms of divine revenge. To pursue his loves, Zeus would often change his form. He became a dazzling golden shower to reach Danae, hidden away in a bronze tower. He transformed into a swan to seduce the noble Leda. Once, he even took the shape of a magnificent bull to carry away Europa across the sea. Each of these tales was more than a mythic escapade. They carried meanings and lessons about the power and unpredictability of desire. They reminded Greeks that even gods were not immune to passion, and that love, like lightning, could strike suddenly and change everything. Then there was Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and irresistible attraction. Born from the sea foam, she emerged radiant and enchanting, her every step stirring waves and sighs. Aphrodite was the embodiment of all that was lovely and desirable in the world. Her beauty was so profound that gods and mortals alike found themselves captivated by her. But her love was not always gentle. It could be as wild and unpredictable as the sea itself. Married to Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalworking, a humble and kind figure, Aphrodite's true passions were often elsewhere. Her secret lover was Ares, the fiery god of war. Their love was fierce and intense, a blending of beauty and battle, attraction and conflict. This relationship symbolized the complex nature of love, where pleasure and danger often walked hand in hand. Aphrodite's influence extended far beyond her own affairs. She was worshipped widely across Greece, from the island of Cyprus to the bustling cities of the mainland. Her temples were places where lovers sought blessings and where young women prayed for beauty, charm, and fertility. To the Greeks, love was a force that could bring joy, inspire creativity, and even heal sorrow. Beside Aphrodite was Eros, her son, or sometimes her companion, a mischievous winged youth, carrying a bow and a quiver of magical arrows. Eros's arrows were no ordinary weapons. A single prick could ignite desire, make hearts flutter, or plunge lovers into confusion and longing. He was a reminder that love could be sudden and unpredictable, a wild force beyond reason. But love in Greek myth was not always sweet and light. It was a powerful, often dangerous force that could uplift or destroy. The story of Psyche and Eros, for instance, is a timeless tale of love's trials and triumphs. Psyche, a mortal woman of breathtaking beauty, incurred the jealousy of Aphrodite herself. Yet Eros, sent to punish her, fell deeply in love. Their journey together was one of trust, hardship, and ultimate union, illustrating that true love requires patience, courage, and faith. Other gods and goddesses shaped the tapestry of love and desire in many ways. Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and wild revelry, presided over celebrations where ordinary rules melted away. In his festivals, people danced under moonlight, lost in music and joy, embracing freedom and pleasure. These moments were not just fun. They symbolized a temporary release from the constraints of society, a chance to connect with deeper instincts and desires. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon, stood as a powerful contrast. Protector of young women and symbol of chastity, she embodied independence and self-control. Her followers sought her strength in times of transition as young girls became women and faced the complexities of love, duty, and freedom. Artemis's presence reminded the Greeks that desire was not the only path, that choice, discipline, and autonomy had their place in the dance of life. The myths also taught lessons about jealousy, fidelity, and the consequences of unchecked desire. Hera's furious punishments of Zeus's lovers and their children, like Heracles, the great hero born of a mortal woman, were warnings that passion without care could bring suffering. The tragic story of Medea, whose love turned to vengeance, and the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice, filled with loss and longing, showed that love's joys were inseparable from its pains. These divine dramas were mirrored in everyday life. In the bustling cities and quiet villages of Greece, the gods' stories inspired art and poetry. Vase paintings captured scenes of lovers' embraces, divine seductions, and playful flirtations. Poets like Sappho sang of longing and affection, while playwrights wove tales of romance and betrayal on the stage. Temples to Aphrodite and Eros dotted the landscape, places where people sought blessings for love and fertility. Festivals honored these deities with music, dance, and offerings, weaving together the sacred and the sensual in celebration. Love was also linked to the natural world and the cycles of life. Festivals, marking the changing seasons, celebrated fertility and renewal, symbolizing the endless dance of birth, growth, and rebirth. The sacred marriages of gods and goddesses reflected human hopes for prosperity and harmony. Yet the Greeks knew that love was a double-edged sword. It could bind people together in joyful union or tear them apart with jealousy and sorrow. Their myths spoke openly of these contradictions, showing that desire was both gift and challenge, beauty and danger. As you imagine these stories told around fires or at festive gatherings, you might see the gods not as distant beings, but as reflections of our own hearts, full of longing, mistakes, courage, and hope. Their lives remind us that love is never simple, but always profound. This rich world of myth and passion laid the foundation for how the ancient Greeks understood love and sexuality, not just as private feelings, but as essential parts of life and culture. Through these stories, they celebrated beauty, explored human nature, and connected mortals to the divine. As the sun dips below the Athenian hills and the stars begin to twinkle, the whispers of these ancient tales float softly on the evening breeze. They invite us to remember that love, in all its forms, is timeless, a story that has journeyed across millennia to meet us here, now. As the rosy fingers of dawn stretched over the city of Athens, the metropolis slowly awoke from its night's rest. The cool morning air carried the scent of freshly baked bread and the faint aroma of olive oil burning in lamps. Streets began to fill with the soft footfalls of citizens on their way to the bustling agora, where merchants unfurled their colorful cloths and called out their goods, and craftsmen prepared their workshops for the day. Laughter and conversation echoed across the stone buildings, weaving a lively tapestry of sounds. Yet beneath this vibrant public life, behind the sturdy wooden doors and shuttered windows of the many homes, lay a quieter, more intimate world, a place where the delicate and complex threads of love, desire, family, and friendship were woven and nurtured. This was the realm of private life, a sacred space carefully guarded, yet filled with the joys and challenges of human connection. In ancient Greece, the line between public and private was drawn differently than in modern times. The city itself was a grand stage on which the lives of men unfolded openly. Men gathered in the agora to debate politics, discuss philosophy, and exchange news. They trained and competed in the gymnasium, exercised their civic duties in assemblies, and socialized in public spaces, designed for conversation and camaraderie. Women, especially in Athens, occupied a more hidden realm. Their world was largely centered within the oikos, the household, where they managed the home, raised children, and performed duties essential to family life. Although often limited in public participation, women were the vital heart of domestic affairs. Their influence was subtle but powerful, extending through the generations via marriage alliances, education of the young, and religious devotion. The typical Greek home was built around a central courtyard, a sunlit open space where the family gathered, where vines climbed trellises, and where women worked at the loom, weaving wool into cloth that would clothe their family and adorn the city. It was in these quiet corners that affection blossomed. Children played, lovers exchanged secret glances, and the bonds of family and friendship grew strong. Men's public lives and women's private worlds were separated by custom and expectation, yet they intertwined in complex ways. Men's freedom to move through the city and participate in civic life contrasted with women's seclusion, but both realms were essential parts of the social fabric. This separation influenced how love and sexuality were experienced. For men, public spaces like the agora and the gymnasium were not only places of commerce and exercise, but social arenas where relationships could be formed and nurtured. Close friendships between men were common and highly valued, often expressed through deep loyalty and affection. In particular, the practice of pederasty, a socially acknowledged relationship between an adult man and a younger male youth, was woven into the fabric of male social life. These relationships were understood as educational and formative, combining mentorship with affection. The older partner was expected to guide the youth in citizenship, ethics, and military skills, while the relationship also held a romantic or erotic element, bounded by cultural norms and respect. Outside these public spheres, men often had relationships with courtesans and slaves, whose roles in society were complex and nuanced. Courtesans were trained companions, educated in music, poetry, and conversation, who provided intellectual and physical companionship. They occupied a space distinct from wives and could interact socially with men more freely. Women's lives, while often confined to the household, were far from static or powerless. Mothers and wives managed the domestic economy, arranged marriages, and preserved family honor. In religious contexts, women sometimes held important roles as priestesses or participants in sacred rituals, particularly those linked to fertility marriage, and the cycles of nature. One such ritual was the Thesmophoria, a festival dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, goddesses of the harvest and the underworld, symbolizing fertility and renewal. During this secretive women-only celebration, participants engaged in rites meant to ensure the fertility of the land and the continuation of life, blending religious devotion with communal bonding. In the realm of intimacy, the private world was enriched by art, poetry, and music. Lovers exchanged gifts, delicate jewelry, fine perfumes, or carefully composed verses, tokens of affection and desire. Poetry was especially treasured as a medium to express feelings that might otherwise be constrained by social rules. The works of Sappho, for example, celebrated love in all its tender and passionate forms, often exploring female desire and friendship with lyrical grace. The symposium was another critical institution of Greek social and intimate life. These were formal drinking parties, attended primarily by men, where participants reclined on couches, drank wine mixed with water, and engaged in spirited conversation, poetry recitations, music, and sometimes flirtation. The symposium was governed by rules ensuring that the gathering balanced pleasure with decorum, fostering camaraderie and intellectual exchange. Within the dimly lit rooms where symposia took place, the boundaries between social classes could blur. Slaves, musicians, and courtesans provided entertainment, while guests debated politics, philosophy, or the nature of love itself. These evenings could be places where friendships deepened, alliances formed, and desires were explored in a context of ritualized pleasure. Yet, despite these occasions of openness and celebration, the Greeks understood the importance of reputation, honor, and social order. Public behavior was closely scrutinized, especially for women, whose chastity and modesty were seen as reflections of their family's standing. A woman's reputation could be the foundation or the downfall of a household's honor, making discretion essential. For men, too, reputation mattered deeply. A citizen's standing in the community depended on his conduct, both in public and private. Excess or neglect in personal relationships could damage a man's honor, influencing his political and social opportunities. Love and sexuality, therefore, were navigated with a careful balance between passion and prudence. The Greeks celebrated desire as a natural and vital force, but recognized that it must be tempered by reason and social responsibility. In this delicate dance, the city of Athens itself became a living metaphor, vibrant, complex, and full of contradictions. Public debates about democracy and philosophy unfolded alongside private moments of tenderness and longing. The voices of poets and playwrights echoed from open-air theaters, while families gathered quietly around evening meals. As twilight deepened and oil lamps flickered to life, the city's streets grew quieter. Behind the thick wooden doors and curtained windows, the daily rhythms of love and desire continued. Whispered conversations in shadowed rooms, the soft laughter of children, the warm embrace of lovers. In the interplay between public spectacle and private intimacy, the ancient Greeks crafted a world that embraced the fullness of human experience. Love was not confined to one place or form, but lived in the streets, the homes, the temples, and the hearts of all. This world invites us to consider the many ways we seek connection, sometimes boldly, sometimes quietly, and reminds us that love, in all its complexities, has always been at the center of human life. In the lively city of Athens, where marble columns caught the sunlight and the voices of philosophers and traders filled the air, the foundation of society was not built solely on politics or warfare. It was laid quietly in the homes, in the bonds of marriage and family, where the future of the city and its people was carefully nurtured and protected. Marriage in ancient Greece was far from a simple affair of two hearts finding each other. Instead, it was a carefully arranged alliance between families, a social contract designed to secure wealth, forge political ties, and ensure legitimate heirs who would carry on the family name and property. The ideal marriage was less about romance and more about duty, responsibility, and continuation. The process began early for many girls, often arranged by their fathers or guardians while they were still children. Families negotiated dowries, valuable gifts of land, money, or goods that the bride's family would provide to the groom's household, symbolizing the joining of two families and the wealth that supported the new union. The size and value of the dowry reflected the status of the family and were carefully recorded and respected. When the day of the wedding arrived, it was marked by ritual and celebration. The bride, often a girl in her early teens, would be adorned in a special dress, dyed saffron or yellow, a veil covering her face to symbolize modesty and transition. She would be escorted from her family home to her new husband's house in a solemn procession, sometimes by torchlight, singing traditional songs that both honored the gods and celebrated the joining of two households. The wedding ceremony itself was deeply symbolic. Offerings were made to the gods, particularly to Hera, the queen of the gods and goddess of marriage, who was called upon to bless the couple with harmony, fertility, and protection. The bride would partake in a ritual bath, purifying her for her new life. The joining of hands, the sharing of bread and wine, and the exchange of vows marked the sacred beginning of their shared journey. Within the household, the wife's role was critical. Though often behind the scenes, she was the manager of the home, responsible for supervising servants or slaves, preparing food, weaving cloth, and raising children. Her influence extended to shaping the family's social life and educating daughters in the duties they would one day undertake. Though women in Athens had limited legal rights and were often confined to the home, their role was respected as the heart of the household. Mothers were revered for nurturing children who would one day defend the city and uphold its values. Their guidance, especially in early childhood, was essential to shaping the future citizen. Husbands, on the other hand, carried the public weight of representation. They owned property, voted in the assembly, and served in the military. The husband was the head of the household, exercising legal authority over wife and children, responsible for their protection and welfare. Marriage was thus a partnership where each played distinct but complementary roles within a strict social framework. Love and affection could indeed blossom within these boundaries. Though often arranged and practical, many marriages grew into genuine companionship. Husbands and wives shared meals, celebrated festivals, and participated in religious rites together. The ideal couple respected each other, working side by side to maintain the household and raise a family. Yet marriage was not the only domain of intimacy or desire. Ancient Greek society acknowledged and accepted relationships outside of marriage, especially for men. It was common for men, particularly those of higher social status, to have companions or lovers beyond their wives. These relationships included courtesans, slaves, and younger males, each occupying distinct social roles and governed by cultural expectations about loyalty and discretion. Courtesans, or hetairai, were often educated women skilled in music, poetry, and conversation. Unlike most wives, hetairai could participate in social and intellectual life more freely, attending symposiums and engaging with men on equal footing. Their companionship combined pleasure with intellect, making them influential figures in certain circles. Slaves, a ubiquitous presence in Greek households, sometimes also occupied roles as companions or sexual partners. Their status complicated these relationships, raising questions of power, consent, and social boundaries. Yet they were a recognized part of the intimate tapestry of Greek life. The famed practice of pederasty, involving a formalized relationship between an adult man and a younger male youth, played a prominent role in male social life and education. This bond was viewed as a mentorship that combined erotic and educational elements. The older partner guided the youth in matters of politics, ethics, and warfare, shaping him into a responsible citizen. This relationship was framed by societal rules, emphasizing respect, age difference, and eventual separation as the youth matured. Children were at the center of family life, cherished as blessings and essential for continuing the family line. Sons were especially prized for their role in carrying on the family name, inheriting property, and fulfilling civic duties. Education for boys began at home and continued in schools, where they learned reading, writing, music, and physical training. Daughters, meanwhile, were prepared for their future roles as wives and mothers. They learned household skills such as weaving, managing servants, and religious duties. Though their public roles were limited, daughters were vital to securing alliances through marriage. The birth of a child was marked by joyful rituals. Families offered prayers and sacrifices to gods of fertility, such as Artemis and Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth. Naming ceremonies and blessings welcomed the newborn into the family and community. Children's early years were filled with love and attention, their laughter echoing through courtyards as they learned the ways of their people. The family was also a place of mourning and remembrance. Funerals were solemn affairs, honoring ancestors and ensuring that the dead found peace. Household shrines, or heroa, preserved the memory of parents and grandparents, reinforcing the connection between past and present. Respect for ancestors was a sacred duty, binding generations together and maintaining social continuity. Marriage and family life were thus intertwined with religion, law, and social customs, reflecting the values of a civilization deeply invested in order, honor, and legacy. They were the living thread that connected individuals to their community, their gods, and their future. Yet within this framework, personal joys and sorrows unfolded. Husbands and wives experienced moments of tenderness and frustration, hope, and disappointment. Children brought happiness but also challenges. Families celebrated births and weddings but also grieved losses. As the sun set over Athens, homes glowed with the warm light of oil lamps. Families gathered for evening meals, sharing bread, olives, cheese, and stories. The quiet spaces of the home filled with laughter, whispered confidences, and the gentle touch of loved ones. Through these intimate moments, the ancient Greeks lived out the timeless human story, the search for connection, belonging, and love amidst the duties and demands of life. This chapter of marriage and family life reveals the delicate balance between social obligation and personal affection, between tradition and change, that shaped one of history's greatest civilizations. It invites us to see beyond the grandeur of ancient Greece's public achievements to the tender, often hidden world where love quietly flourished. The city of Athens thrived under a bright Mediterranean sun, its marble temples gleaming against the blue sky, while the chatter of merchants, philosophers, and citizens filled the bustling streets. Yet away from the public hustle, in quiet gymnasiums shaded by olive trees and in the tranquil groves that dotted the countryside, a different kind of relationship blossomed, one that transcended the simple contracts of marriage or the obligations of family. These were bonds of friendship and desire, complex and revered, weaving together minds, hearts, and bodies into connections that shaped lives and society alike. The Greeks recognized the many forms love could take and created a vocabulary rich enough to describe its subtle varieties. Philia was the word for deep, enduring friendship, a love based on mutual respect, loyalty, and shared values. This affection was more than a casual bond. It was the foundation upon which communities were built and maintained. Athenian citizens viewed philia as essential to the functioning of their democracy, a thread that tied individuals to one another and to the city itself. Imagine two young men meeting after their morning training at the palestra, their muscles still warmed from wrestling and running, their minds eager for discourse. They might wander beneath the shade of cypress trees, discussing the latest philosophical ideas or the strategies of a recent battle. As their dialogue deepened, so did their friendship, blossoming into a connection that transcended simple companionship. But beyond this ideal friendship, the Greeks embraced a practice known as pederasty, a socially acknowledged relationship between an adult man, Erastes, and an adolescent boy, Eromenos. This relationship was not merely about affection. It was a vital educational institution, combining mentorship with emotional and often physical intimacy. The older man provided guidance in politics, ethics, warfare, and culture, nurturing the younger man's development into a responsible citizen and warrior. The erotic dimension of pederasty was woven into this mentorship, seen as a natural and powerful bond. However, it was tightly regulated by customs and expectations. The older partner was expected to act with dignity and respect, while the youth was to cultivate self-control and modesty. The relationship was temporary, meant to prepare the youth for adulthood and eventual marriage. It was a delicate dance, balancing affection and propriety, and was often celebrated in poetry and art. This custom reflected a culture that did not view desire in binary terms, but as a fluid and multifaceted experience. The Greeks saw love as a force that could inspire virtue, courage, and intellectual growth. Philosophers like Plato, in works such as the Symposium, discussed eros, passionate desire not merely as physical longing, but as a path to spiritual and philosophical enlightenment. Love between men was thus elevated from mere passion to a pursuit of truth and beauty. While much of the surviving literature focuses on male relationships, women in ancient Greece also formed profound emotional and sometimes romantic bonds, though these were less publicly documented due to societal restrictions. The island of Lesbos produced the celebrated poet Sappho, whose verses speak with exquisite tenderness and longing about her love and admiration for other women. Her poetry reveals a world where female friendships and desires were real and deeply felt, even if largely private. Sappho's words celebrate beauty and passion with a delicate grace, describing the thrill of a glance, the warmth of touch, and the ache of separation. In a society that often limited women's public roles, such intimate friendships provided comfort and joy, sustaining them in their daily lives. Back in Athens, the Symposium, the famed social gathering of men, served as a crucible for friendship, desire, and intellectual exchange. Picture a room filled with reclining men, drinking wine diluted with water, engaging in heated debates about politics, philosophy, or poetry. The flicker of oil lamps cast dancing shadows on the painted walls, while musicians played the lyre and poets recited their verses. At these gatherings, friendships were deepened and tested. Men shared stories, challenged each other's wit, and explored the boundaries between companionship and attraction. Hetairae, educated courtesans, skilled in music, poetry, and conversation, often attended symposia, offering both entertainment and companionship to the guests. Unlike most women of the city, Hetairai moved with a degree of social freedom, their relationships with men blending pleasure with intellectual connection. Yet, despite the enjoyment and openness of these events, the bonds of friendship and desire were not without complexity. Jealousy could flare, rivalries could arise, and the maintenance of honor and reputation was paramount. A man's standing in society depended not only on his public deeds, but also on his private conduct. The Greeks understood that love was rarely simple or singular. People could feel affection for multiple friends, lovers, or mentors, and these relationships could evolve or fade with time. The fluidity of desire was accepted and even celebrated as part of the human experience. Friendship and desire also extended beyond the elite. Among ordinary citizens, craftsmen, and even slaves, bonds formed through shared work, hardship, and community. In the crowded neighborhoods of Athens, children played together in courtyards, apprentices learned from masters, and neighbors relied on one another for support. These relationships, while less formalized, were no less vital to the social fabric. The Greeks also had rituals and customs to honor these bonds. Gift-giving was common among friends and lovers. Fine oils, crafted jewelry, or carefully composed poems were tokens of affection and esteem. Festivals and religious ceremonies often celebrated love and friendship, invoking gods such as Aphrodite, Eros, and Hera to bless relationships with harmony and passion. Philosophers pondered the nature of friendship and love as essential to a virtuous life. Aristotle famously described friendship as necessary not only for happiness, but for the very functioning of society, emphasizing that true friendship was based on goodness and mutual virtue. As the city's golden light faded into the cool embrace of evening and the stars emerged over the Athenian sky, the bonds of friendship and desire glowed warmly behind closed doors and within private gatherings. In whispered words, shared laughter, and the tender exchange of glances and gifts, the ancient Greeks lived a story of human connection as rich and varied as the city itself. This chapter in their lives offers us a window into a world where love and friendship were celebrated in many forms, where desire was understood as a complex, evolving force, and where the meeting of minds and hearts was seen as a gift to be treasured. The sun rose slowly over the marble columns of Athens, casting long shadows across the bustling agora where merchants shouted their wares and philosophers debated loudly beneath the open sky. But beyond the everyday noise of the marketplace and the gravitas of the council chambers, the city's heartbeat pulsed strongest during its festivals. Those sacred moments when the citizens paused their daily routines to honor the gods and to celebrate the vital forces that shaped their lives. Among these forces, none was more powerful or more celebrated than love, its pleasures, its mysteries, and its challenges. For the Greeks, love was a divine gift, a sacred fire that ignited the soul and bound people to one another and to the eternal rhythms of nature. Through festivals and rituals dedicated to the gods of love and fertility, the people of Athens and other city-states enacted a drama as old as time itself, where humans and deities intertwined in joyous communion. At the heart of many such celebrations was Aphrodite, the goddess whose name was whispered in reverence and whose image was adorned with flowers, jewels, and fragrant oils. Her temples were places of pilgrimage and prayer, where women and men alike sought her blessing to find beauty, passion, and fertility. The annual Aphrodisia was one of the most anticipated festivals of the year, a day set aside for purification, renewal, and celebration. As the festival dawned, the city stirred early. Women gathered in homes and courtyards, weaving garlands of roses, myrtle, and other fragrant blossoms, sacred to Aphrodite. The sweet scent of these flowers mingled with the smoke of incense as they processed through the streets, their laughter ringing out like music. The garlands were not merely decorations, but symbols of life and love's blossoming power, woven with intention and devotion. Throughout the day, offerings of oil, honey, and wine were brought to the goddess's altar. Priests and priestesses led prayers and hymns, invoking Aphrodite's grace to bless marriages, births, and the passions that stirred within every heart. The festival was both communal and deeply personal, each participant seeking connection to the goddess who embodied the beauty and desire that made life vibrant. Dancing was a central part of the celebration. Men and women, young and old, formed circles and moved to the rhythm of flutes and drums. Their steps mimicked the cycles of nature, the sowing of seeds, the blooming of flowers, the fruiting of trees, and the harvest's bounty. These dances were more than entertainment. They were rituals that honored the eternal cycle of birth, growth, and renewal, reminding all who danced that love and desire were as natural and necessary as the changing seasons. Alongside the aphrodisia was the Thesmophoria, a solemn and secretive festival dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. Unlike the public and often exuberant celebrations of Aphrodite, the Thesmophoria was a time when women gathered in seclusion to honor the mysteries of fertility and the cycles of life and death. Held in autumn, it was believed to ensure the fertility of the land and the women themselves. In secluded groves or mountain sanctuaries, women from all social classes came together to share rites that were passed down through generations. The rituals involved the symbolic burial of piglets, a representation of death and rebirth, and the consumption of sacred foods. Through fasting, song, and prayer, the women connected with the powerful divine feminine forces embodied by Demeter and Persephone. The festival was a rare space where women exercised spiritual authority and solidarity, sharing stories, hopes, and sacred knowledge away from the watchful eyes of men. While the Thesmophoria honored the earth's fertility and the power of motherhood, the Dionysia brought a different energy to the city. This festival, devoted to Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and transformation, was a time of liberation and creative explosion. The city transformed into a stage for theatrical performances that explored love's many faces, its joys, pains, madness, and redemption. The Dionysia was a riot of color and sound. Revelers wore masks and costumes that blurred the line between human and divine, mortal and mythic. Music filled the streets, and the intoxicating scent of wine mingled with the night air. The festival was a space where social norms relaxed, and the wild, untamed aspects of human nature could be expressed freely. The theater was central to the Dionysia's celebrations. Audiences gathered in open-air amphitheaters, their voices rising and falling with the tragic and comic tales performed by actors. These plays did not shy away from the complexities of desire. They revealed love's power to heal and to destroy, to inspire courage and to provoke jealousy. The stories of gods and mortals, entangled in webs of passion and betrayal, mirrored the lives of those watching, creating a shared catharsis and reflection. Outside the grand festivals, smaller rituals and daily acts of devotion punctuated Greek life with moments of sacred intimacy. Couples might visit roadside shrines or household altars to offer prayers for marital harmony or the blessing of children. Individuals placed small votive statues or tokens, depictions of doves, roses, or Eros himself, at temples to attract love or thank the gods for favors granted. The Greeks believed the gods were active participants in human love, capricious and playful. Eros, often portrayed as a winged boy armed with arrows, was thought to shoot sudden pangs of desire into unsuspecting hearts. His influence was both joyous and dangerous, capable of igniting great passion or causing confusion and pain. The unpredictability of love's power was a recurring theme in both myth and daily life. Symbols associated with love and fertility, doves cooing softly in temple courtyards, apples offered at altars, and the delicate myrtle wreaths worn by brides reminded worshippers of the close ties between the human and divine. These emblems carried meanings layered with myth, tradition, and personal hope, anchoring love within a sacred framework. The festivals were also occasions for social bonding across the city. Rich and poor, young and old, slave and free mingled in the shared experience of celebration. Children dressed in their finest clothes, carrying offerings to the gods. Young women looked toward future marriages with hope and anticipation. Elders bestowed blessings and recounted tales of love's lessons and triumphs. Music and poetry were the lifeblood of these moments. Lyres and flutes filled the air with melodies that echoed the pulse of life, while poets recited verses celebrating famous lovers, heroes, and gods whose stories had become part of the cultural soul. These songs and stories preserve the memory of love's power to transform and sustain. In every dance step, every prayer whispered, every song sung, the Greeks wove a tapestry of meaning around love and desire. They honored not only its pleasures, but its sacred responsibilities to family, to community, and to the gods. Through these celebrations, love was lifted, from the personal to the cosmic, from fleeting emotion to eternal force. As night fell and stars blanketed the sky above the Acropolis, the city glowed softly with the light of lamps and fire. Within homes and temples, the spirit of the festivals lingered, a quiet blessing carried into everyday life. The dance of love and desire continued, an unbroken thread connecting the mortal to the divine, the past to the present, and every heart to the next. The city of Athens buzzed with life as dawn broke over its gleaming marble temples and the sprawling agora filled with merchants and philosophers. Yet beyond the public bustle, the real story of the city was told in countless smaller, intimate moments. In quiet homes, shaded courtyards, and along sun-dappled paths where the threads of love and desire wove through the everyday lives of its citizens. Love in Athens was never a singular experience, but a kaleidoscope of emotions and relationships, some formal and bound by tradition, others spontaneous and deeply personal. While festivals and grand rituals honored the gods and the forces of passion, it was in the daily rhythms of life that love's true power was felt and expressed. Marriage stood as the bedrock of Greek society. Families arranged unions with careful consideration of wealth, lineage, and political alliances. The bride, often a young girl on the cusp of womanhood, left the familiar embrace of her family to enter the household of her husband, a transition both joyful and fraught with uncertainty. The husband, typically older and firmly established in public life, took on the mantle of protector and provider. His role extended beyond his family, involving participation in civic duties, warfare, and religious observances. The wife, by contrast, presided over the domestic sphere. Though her world was often confined within the walls of the home, her influence was vast. She managed servants, ensured the smooth running of the household, raised children, and maintained the sacred hearth, the symbolic and spiritual heart of the family. Within these boundaries, love could grow quietly but profoundly. Marriages often began without fiery passion, but with time, many couples developed bonds of companionship, mutual respect, and care. The husband might present gifts of scented oils, delicately woven textiles, or recite poetry by candlelight as gestures of affection. The wife's love showed in the tending of the household, in prayers offered at the family's shrine, and in nurturing the children who represented the family's future. Yet, the world outside marriage was equally rich with expressions of love and desire. Athens' public spaces, the gymnasium, the agora, the theatres, and the symposia were vibrant arenas where friendships and romantic relationships flourished. Male friendships were central to Athenian social life. Men trained together in the palestra, debating philosophy and politics in the agora, and sharing meals and wine in symposia. Physical affection among male friends, embraces, kisses on cheeks or lips, resting hands on shoulders, was common and a mark of trust and loyalty rather than necessarily romantic intent. One particularly important social institution was the mentorship relationship between an older man, the Erastes, and a younger male youth, the Eromenos. This relationship blended educational, emotional, and sometimes erotic elements. The older man guided the youth in matters of politics, warfare, and ethics, shaping him into a virtuous citizen. The bonds of pederasty were governed by social norms, emphasizing respect and consent. The Eromenos, typically in his mid-teens, was expected to exhibit modesty and restraint, while the Erastes was charged with acting as a protector and moral guide rather than merely a lover. This relationship was often temporary, a formative stage in the youth's life, celebrated in art and poetry as a noble union of love and learning. Women, though largely excluded from political life, formed their own rich networks of affection. Within the privacy of their homes and quarters, women gathered to weave, share stories, and support each other through the joys and hardships of life. Female friendships often carried deep emotional bonds, sometimes with romantic or sensual undertones. The lyric poetry of Sappho of Lesbos offers one of the rare and poignant glimpses into the world of female love in antiquity. Her verses celebrate the beauty, longing, and tenderness between women with a sincerity and intimacy that transcends time. Through her words, one senses a world where female desire was lived with passion and grace, even if not always publicly acknowledged. Athenian society also featured hetairai, educated and cultured women who moved more freely than typical women. Unlike most wives, hetairai could attend symposia and engage in intellectual conversations, offering companionship and entertainment to men. Relationships with hetairai could include romance, intellectual partnership, and sexual intimacy. For men, hetairai provided companionship that was often absent in the formal duty-bound marriages of Athens. For the women themselves, this role offered a degree of independence and social influence that few other avenues allowed. Yet love was never without its tensions. Jealousy, social expectations, and the strictures of honor shaped how affection was expressed and received. Same-sex relationships, for instance, were accepted within cultural frameworks but still had boundaries, especially regarding age and social roles. Female-female desire was less publicly visible, adding layers of secrecy and complexity. The social hierarchy also influenced love's expression. Citizens enjoyed full participation in civic and romantic life. Metics, resident foreigners, had fewer rights, but often shared in social pleasures. Slaves' experiences of love were constrained, but not absent. Even within slavery, stories tell of affection and connection that transcended bondage. Daily acts of love and desire manifested in small but meaningful ways. Gifts of perfume, wreaths of flowers, tokens of carved ivory or stone were exchanged as signs of affection. Poetry and song were common ways to declare feelings or celebrate a beloved. Public displays were balanced with private moments of intimacy, soft touches, shared meals, quiet conversations by lamplight. Philosophers debated the nature of love, distinguishing between mere physical desire and higher forms of spiritual affection. Plato's Symposium famously describes love as a ladder ascending from earthly attraction to the contemplation of divine beauty and truth. These ideas influenced how Greeks thought about their relationships, encouraging them to seek love that uplifted the soul. Despite such lofty ideals, real life was full of passion, jealousy, heartbreak, and joy. Lovers whispered promises beneath the moonlit sky, friends clasped hands in greeting, and families gathered around hearths to share stories of love's power and pitfalls. Athens, in all its complexity, embraced love as both a personal journey and a public force. It was a source of identity and community, challenge and comfort. The pulse of desire beat quietly but steadily through every street and home, connecting people across generations in the eternal dance of the human heart. As stars sparkled above the city's temples and houses, the Athenians carried their stories of love, of friendship and mentorship, marriage and secret longing into the night. These stories were the threads that wove their lives together, binding mortal to divine, past to future, heart to heart. The morning sun spread its golden light over Athens, warming the stone walls of the Palestra where the city's youth gathered for their daily training. The air was alive with the sound of laughter, the rhythmic pounding of feet against stone, and the occasional sharp command of a trainer guiding a wrestling match. This was no ordinary gymnasium. It was a sacred ground where boys were transformed into young men, where bodies and minds were tempered like steel in a forge. In the ancient Greek world, physical strength alone did not make a man. Character, intellect, and virtue were equally essential. The Palestra was a place where these qualities were honed under the watchful eyes of mentors who took responsibility for shaping the next generation of citizens. Among these mentors, a special and culturally important role was that of the Eristes, the adult male lover and teacher who formed a unique bond with the adolescent Eromenos. This relationship combined education, affection, and sometimes sexual intimacy within a framework deeply embedded in Athenian values. It is tempting, from a modern perspective, to reduce this relationship to its sexual elements alone, but the Greeks saw it differently. The bond between Erastes and Eromenos was as much about moral education, emotional support, and social integration as it was about physical love. This mentorship was a rite of passage, a carefully regulated and highly ritualized process through which boys learned the arts of war, governance, philosophy, and citizenship. Young Nicandros was on the cusp of this transformation. Barely 15, he was both excited and apprehensive as he prepared for the day's training, knowing that his life was about to change profoundly. Lysias, his chosen Erastes, was a man admired throughout Athens, not only for his skill in battle, but for his wisdom, patience, and kindness. Theirs was a relationship that blended the practical and the poetic, the physical and the spiritual. In the cool shade of the olive grove adjoining the Palestra, Lysias greeted Nicandros with a warm smile and clasped his shoulder. "Today, we begin a journey together," he said, "a journey of strength, wisdom, and understanding. You will learn more than how to wield a spear. You will learn how to live as a true citizen of Athens." Over the following months, Lysias guided Nicandros through grueling physical exercises, running, wrestling, discus throwing, but also through discussion about justice, virtue, and the responsibilities of citizenship. They debated the ideas of Plato and Aristotle, recited poetry of Homer and Pindar, and visited the assembly where elders spoke of laws and war. Their relationship was one of deep affection and respect. Lysias encouraged Nicandros's curiosity and challenged his assumptions, treating him not as a mere pupil, but as a partner in exploration. In quiet moments, they shared stories beneath the stars, and Lysias spoke of the gods and heroes who had shaped their world. Expressions of physical affection, touches on the arm, shared embraces, soft kisses, were woven naturally into their companionship. These gestures were never casual. They signified trust, protection, and mutual regard. The city's social codes demanded discretion and honor, ensuring that the relationship uplifted the youth rather than exploiting his innocence. This mentorship was not simply about pleasure or desire, but about teaching self-control, temperance, and the ability to direct passion toward noble ends. The Greeks believed that love, properly guided, was a force that could elevate the soul, inspire courage, and bind the community together. However, the relationship was delicate. The Erastes had to be mindful not to overwhelm or possess the Eromenos, who retained agency and was expected to exhibit dignity and modesty. Public opinion, family honor, and personal virtue all weighed heavily on the bond, requiring balance and mutual care. Outside the Palestra, the city itself seemed to breathe with the pulse of love and education. The gods, too, modeled complex relationships of desire and mentorship. The myth of Zeus and the beautiful youth Ganymede, who was carried to Olympus to become cupbearer of the gods, illustrated themes of divine favor, protection, and transformation through love. Apollo's bond with Hyacinth, marked by jealousy and tragedy, spoke of the fragility and intensity of youthful affection. Such stories were not mere entertainment, but teachings, cautionary and inspiring tales about the power and risks of desire. The Athenians understood love as a double-edged sword, capable of great good and great harm, depending on how it was wielded. Meanwhile, girls and young women lived lives shaped by different expectations. Their education was mostly domestic, focused on preparing them for marriage and motherhood. They learned to manage households, spin and weave fine cloth, and participate in religious rituals honoring goddesses such as Hera and Demeter. Female friendships provided emotional support and companionship, though often confined within the privacies of the home. Poets like Sappho of Lesbos gave rare voice to the experience of female desire, celebrating the beauty and passion between women in verses filled with tenderness and longing. Though such relationships were less publicly visible, they were no less real or meaningful. Within this complex social fabric, sexuality was not a taboo subject, but an integral part of life, celebrated, regulated, and philosophically explored. Symposia offered venues where men discussed love, ethics, and politics over wine and song. Here, intellectual conversations mixed with flirtations and performances by hetairai educated women who held a unique social position. These women, often companions and entertainers, exercised influence through their wit, beauty, and knowledge. In such gatherings, distinctions between friendship, mentorship, and romantic love sometimes blurred, reflecting the Greeks' nuanced understanding of human relationships. Love was seen as a multifaceted experience, ranging from physical attraction to spiritual communion. Young Nicandros's journey through mentorship mirrored the city's broader values. He learned that love was not merely a private pleasure, but a public responsibility. Through his bond with Lysias, he discovered how desire could inspire honor, courage, and wisdom. He also learned the importance of self-restraint, respect for others, and the pursuit of the greater good. This education prepared him not only for adulthood, but for the complexities of social life, where personal affection intertwined with civic duty and religious devotion. Nicandros realized that the lessons of love and desire were among the most vital he could receive, guiding him through the challenges ahead as a citizen, warrior, and human being. The role of sexuality in education and mentorship thus stood at the heart of ancient Greek culture, a testament to the city's belief in the transformative power of love. It was a dance of minds and bodies, hearts and spirits, a sacred bond that shaped lives and communities across generations. As the sun set over Athens and the shadows lengthened across the Palestra, Nicandros and Lysias shared a moment of quiet companionship, an embrace that spoke of trust, hope, and the promise of all that was yet to come. The city of Athens was never silent. Its streets pulsed with the footsteps of citizens and foreigners alike, as merchants called out their wares, philosophers debated in the agora, and children chased each other beneath the shade of olive trees. Yet few times during the year did the city's energy swell so completely as during its grand festivals, occasions that united the community in celebration, worship, and shared expression of joy and desire. Among these festivals, those dedicated to the gods of love, fertility, and beauty held a special place. They were times when the boundaries between the sacred and the sensual blurred, when the city embraced not only the responsibilities of civic life, but also the pleasures and mysteries of love. The most famous of these was the Anthesteria, a 3-day festival held every late winter in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and transformation. It was a time when the veil between worlds thinned and the city reveled in a joyous release from everyday order. During the Anthesteria, the streets overflowed with laughter, music, and dancing. Wine flowed freely, loosening tongues and hearts alike. Citizens and strangers mingled in the open air, sharing food and drink in a spirit of communal joy. Masks and costumes added to the atmosphere of playful disguise and liberation. The festival's rites also involved fertility rituals, where symbolic acts invoked the earth's renewal and the vitality of life. Women sang songs of longing and hope, men offered gifts to the gods, and couples, both married and unmarried, celebrated their bonds with affection and tenderness. Another key festival was the Aphrodisia, held in honor of Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Temples dedicated to Aphrodite became centers of worship and celebration, where offerings of flowers, perfumes, and sweets were made in hopes of attracting favor and blessing in matters of the heart. The rituals often included processions, dances, and theatrical performances that dramatized myths of love's power and unpredictability. The stories of Aphrodite's own loves, joyful and tragic, reminded worshippers of love's dual nature, a source of pleasure and a challenge to be faced with courage. For many Athenians, participation in these festivals was both a religious duty and a deeply personal experience. Love was not a private affair alone, but a force woven into the city's spiritual life and collective identity. Symposia, the famed drinking parties of Greek men, also took place throughout the year, often following public festivals or athletic games. These gatherings were occasions for philosophical debate, poetry recitation, music, and sometimes flirtation. The symposium was an arena where intellectual and erotic energies intertwined, where friendships were deepened, and where the boundaries of social norms were gently pushed. Men reclined on couches, sipping wine from shallow cups, engaging in spirited discussions about justice, beauty, and desire. The presence of hetairai, educated and cultured women, added wit, charm, and grace to the evening, elevating it beyond mere revelry. These women were not merely entertainers. Many were skilled in rhetoric, music, and philosophy. Their relationships with men could involve genuine affection and intellectual partnership, offering a counterpoint to the more formal and duty-bound marriages of the city. Public festivals also provided a stage for more explicit expressions of love and sexuality, though these were always balanced by ritual propriety and symbolic meaning. The Greeks celebrated the body and its pleasures openly, yet within a framework that honored balance, moderation, and respect for the gods. The presence of statues and art depicting nude figures in the city's temples, baths, and public spaces underscored this cultural embrace of physical beauty as a reflection of divine harmony. Nudity was not seen as shameful, but as a natural state, an expression of human vitality and a tribute to the perfection of form. Athletic competitions, often held during religious festivals, featured young men competing in the nude. These events combined admiration for physical excellence with social and religious significance, reinforcing ideals of discipline, courage, and beauty. For women, participation in festivals varied depending on their social status and the particular rites involved. Married women took part in rituals honoring goddesses of fertility and hearth, while young maidens participated in ceremonies marking their transition to adulthood. The Thesmophoria, for example, was a women-only festival dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, focused on fertility and the cycles of nature. It involved secret rites, offerings of grain and fruit, and communal feasting, fostering bonds among women and celebrating their roles in sustaining life. Stories and myths permeated these festivals, bringing to life the gods and heroes whose loves and struggles mirrored those of mortals. The tale of Orpheus and Eurydice, of Pyramus and Thisbe, or of Helen and Paris were performed and retold, reminding participants of love's power to inspire, transform, and sometimes destroy. The performative aspect of these festivals allowed the city's inhabitants to explore the complexities of desire safely within symbolic and communal frameworks. By acting out these stories, they connected with timeless human emotions and reaffirmed the social values that balance passion with responsibility. Amidst the dancing, singing, and ritual acts, couples found moments to express their own affection. Lovers might steal private embraces in the garden or exchange gifts of flowers and perfume. The festival atmosphere encouraged openness and joy, making love a shared celebration rather than a hidden secret. Children watched these festivities with wide eyes, learning through experience the importance of love in their community. They saw elders dancing and laughing, heard poetry praising beauty and courage, and absorbed the rhythms of a culture where love was a vital, living force. The festivals also reinforced social hierarchies and roles. Citizens celebrated as equals in their shared devotion, yet distinctions between free men, women, metics, and slaves were maintained. Some rituals were restricted to certain classes or genders, reflecting the complex social fabric of Athens. Yet within these limits, love's expression was varied and rich. The city's art and literature overflowed with depictions of desire, from playful flirtations to tragic heartbreaks, capturing the full spectrum of human experience. The works of playwrights like Aristophanes and Euripides often explored themes of love, jealousy, and desire with humor and pathos. Their comedies and tragedies were performed during festival seasons, offering the public a mirror to their own lives and emotions. One can imagine a festival evening when Nicandros, now a young man, wandered through the crowded streets of Athens, lanterns glowing like fireflies overhead, the scent of blooming jasmine mixed with the sounds of lyres and laughter. He paused before a statue of Aphrodite, contemplating the goddess's smile, both tender and knowing. Nearby, dancers twirled in colorful robes, and the air was thick with excitement and possibility. Nicandros thought of his friends, his mentors, and the loves he had yet to know. In the heart of the festival, amidst the mingling voices and joyful cries, he felt connected to the city, its gods, and the eternal dance of love that shaped all their lives. These festivals, with their joyful abandon and sacred rites, were not mere entertainments, but profound expression of a culture that embraced love in all its complexity. They celebrated human connection, the beauty of the body and soul, and the deep bonds that held society together. Through ritual, art, and shared experience, Athens taught its citizens that love was a gift from the gods, a force that could inspire greatness, foster community, and illuminate the mysteries of life itself. As the festival drew to a close and the city settled into the quiet of night, the memory of laughter, music, and dance lingered like a warm embrace. Love, in its many forms, had been honored and renewed, ready to weave its threads anew through the lives of all who called Athens home. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft, amber glow over the terracotta rooftops of Athens. As the city's bustling streets began to quiet, behind closed doors, the rhythms of life continued in a different tempo, one often hidden from the gaze of men and the public eye. Within the shaded courtyards and quiet chambers of the oikos, the household, the world of Athenian women unfolded, filled with friendship, longing, resilience, and quiet power. While the men of Athens gathered in the agora to debate politics or trained in the palestra to hone their bodies, women's lives were largely centered within the household and the sacred spaces that surrounded it. Their daily tasks ranged from supervising servants and preparing meals to weaving fine textiles and tending to children. Yet these routine duties belied the complex emotional lives and social networks women cultivated within and beyond the home. Marriage was the expected path for most women, a transition marking their passage from their father's household to that of their husband. Usually arranged by families seeking to strengthen alliances and secure futures, marriages often took place when girls were still in their early teens. The bride, often nervous yet hopeful, left behind the familiarity of her childhood home to enter a new world, one that demanded loyalty, obedience, and sacrifice. Yet within these constraints, many women found love, not only with their husbands, but in friendships, emotional bonds, and sometimes secret romances that flourished in the shadows. Love was not absent in the lives of women. It simply took different forms and was often expressed in ways that history only glimpses through poetry, letters, and whispered stories passed down. Helena was one such young woman. Married barely a year to a respected citizen named Demetrios, she had quickly learned the weight of her new responsibilities. Her days were filled with overseeing the household's affairs, organizing meals for guests, managing the slaves, and teaching her young son the stories of their ancestors. Yet when the household settled into the calm of evening, Helena treasured the moments she could share with her closest friends. In the cool shadow of her courtyard, she met with Dione, a childhood companion who had recently married as well. The two women spoke in low tones, sharing their hopes, frustrations, and dreams. For Helena, these gatherings were a lifeline, rare opportunities to express her true feelings and escape the silence expected of wives. "Do you think Demetrios truly loves me?" Helena asked one evening, tracing patterns in the dust with her finger. "He is kind and honorable, but sometimes I wonder if love is more than duty." Dion smiled gently. "Love is many things, Helena. It is in small gestures, shared glances, and the care we give one another. Perhaps it grows slowly, like the olive tree, steady and strong. Their friendship was a sanctuary, a place where affection flowed freely between women. They exchanged gifts, delicate perfumes imported from distant lands, wreaths of fresh herbs and flowers, small trinkets woven from gold thread. These tokens were not merely decorative, but symbols of love and trust. The poetry of Sappho, though penned far from Athens, resonated deeply among women like Helena and Dione. Her verses spoke of longing and beauty, of secret glances and whispered words. "Come to me, beloved," she wrote, capturing the tenderness of female desire in lines that echoed in the hearts of many. Though female-female relationships were seldom discussed openly in Athenian society, evidence suggests they were known and quietly accepted within private circles. The boundaries between friendship and romance often blurred, creating spaces of intimacy that defied public conventions. Beyond friendships, women's religious roles offered another sphere of influence and community. Priestesses of goddesses like Athena, Hera, and Demeter commanded respect and held sacred duties that connected the mortal and divine worlds. They led rituals, presided over festivals, and maintained temples, positions that afforded them a voice in spiritual and social affairs. Festivals such as the Thesmophoria, a women-only celebration honoring Demeter and Persephone, were moments of collective power. Here, women gathered in secret rites, celebrating fertility, renewal, and the sacred cycles of life. The rituals involved offerings of grain, fruit, and wine, symbolic enactments of death and rebirth, and shared feasting that strengthened bonds of sisterhood. At these times, women experienced freedom from their usual roles, expressing joy, grief, and desire within the embrace of their community. The festival was both a spiritual renewal and a social gathering, reinforcing women's essential role in sustaining life and culture. Yet, the social restrictions on women were real and often harsh. Legal rights were limited. Women could not vote or hold political office. Their movements were often confined, and their reputations strictly guarded. Gossip and scandal could ruin a woman's life, making discretion paramount. Within marriage, wives were expected to be faithful and obedient, their primary role to bear legitimate children and manage the home. But even within these limits, women could influence family decisions through counsel and persuasion. Mothers often shaped their sons' futures through education and connections, wielding power behind the scenes. The role of heterae, women who lived independently and engaged with men as companions and intellectual partners, challenged traditional norms. Unlike most women, heterae were educated, skilled in music, dance, and rhetoric, and enjoyed social freedoms unavailable to wives and daughters. They frequented symposia, where they entertained men with their wit and artistry, sometimes forming lasting bonds that combined romance, companionship, and mutual respect. Their relationships, though sometimes looked down upon by the elite, demonstrated the varied expressions of female sexuality and agency in ancient Greece. One renowned hetera, Aspasia of Miletus, was known not only for her beauty, but for her sharp intellect and political influence. She is said to have advised Pericles, Athens' great statesman, and hosted gatherings that attracted philosophers and poets. Aspasia's life illustrates the potential for women to transcend social barriers and participate in public life through relationships and intellect. Returning to Helena, her own experience with desire was complex. She admired her husband's honor, but longed for deeper emotional connection. Occasionally, her thoughts drifted to Callias, a childhood friend whose laughter once filled their shared playtimes. Though bound by marriage, Helena found solace in recalling their innocent closeness, a tender reminder of affection before duty. Her letters to Dion reveal moments of secret yearning and the delicate navigation of societal expectations. My heart stirs with memories I dare not voice aloud. In quiet moments, I feel the pull of old loves and new hopes, tangled like the ivy on the temple walls. Yet I am bound, as are we all, by the threads of duty and honor. These letters, though hidden, speak of the universal human experience of desire, its joys, pains, and contradictions. The home itself was a stage for love's many dramas. Within its walls, women shared stories, sang songs, and passed down traditions. The hearth was a place of warmth and memory, where the past and future met in daily acts of care. Children learned from their mothers the values of courage, kindness, and piety. Daughters watched their mothers and friends, absorbing lessons of strength and resilience. The bonds of female friendship became a source of empowerment, creating a hidden network of support. Despite the limitations imposed by society, women found ways to express their love and shape their destinies. Through friendship, faith, and subtle influence, they carved spaces where their voices could be heard and their hearts fulfilled. As night fell over Athens, the city's women retreated to their chambers, their whispered conversations and soft laughter mingling with the sounds of the city's slumber. In these quiet hours, love lived not only in grand gestures, but in the tender embrace of a friend's hand, the shared secret smile, and the unspoken understanding that sustained them. Helena, lying beside her sleeping son, thought of the day to come, the festivals, the prayers, the endless cycle of life. Yet within her heart, a spark of hope remained, that love, in all its forms, could transcend boundaries and light the way through the shadows. Her story, like those of countless women before and after her, is a testament to the enduring power of desire and friendship, a silent, steady force that shapes lives and hearts beyond the eyes of history. Athens was a city of remarkable contradictions. It was a cradle of democracy, philosophy, and the arts, yet it was also a society defined by strict hierarchies and gender roles. Within this vibrant, often paradoxical world lived the hetairai, women who defied the typical boundaries placed on females in ancient Greek society. They were courtesans, companions, artists, and intellectuals, weaving themselves into the social and cultural fabric in a way that was both celebrated and contested. Unlike the typical Athenian wife, whose life was confined largely to the gynecium, the women's quarters of the household, the hetairai inhabited public spaces, attended symposia, conversed with powerful men, and engaged in cultural debates. Their education was comprehensive. Music, poetry, rhetoric, philosophy, and social graces were as much a part of their training as physical beauty and charm. Callista was one such hetera. Her story was whispered in the city's crowded marketplaces, told in the taverns where poets gathered, and inscribed in the minds of those who had been touched by her presence. Originally from a modest background in a coastal town, she had journeyed to Athens with determination and ambition. There, she cultivated her talents meticulously, transforming herself into a figure both admired and feared. One evening, as the orange light of sunset bled through the marble columns of a wealthy aristocrat's home, Callista reclined gracefully among the gathered men and women at a symposium. The room was rich with the scent of burning oil lamps, mingling with the sweet aroma of wine and exotic perfumes. The air buzzed with the sounds of laughter, debate, and the soft strumming of the lyre. Callista was in her element, with eyes that sparkled with intelligence and a voice that carried both warmth and authority, she engaged the assembly in a discussion about the nature of love and desire. Eros is not mere physical pleasure, she declared, gesturing with delicate hands. It is the force that drives us toward beauty and truth, that ignites the soul and inspires the mind. To love is to seek the divine in another, to be elevated beyond oneself. Her companions, philosophers, generals, poets, nodded thoughtfully. For many, her insights added a depth to the symposium that transformed it from a simple social gathering into a meeting of minds. The Hetaire's unique position allowed them to serve as cultural conduits, blending artistry with intellect, sensuality with wisdom. The life of a Hetaira was far from easy. Though they enjoyed freedoms denied to most women, public presence, education, and social connections, they were often viewed with suspicion or disdain. The city's laws and customs placed limits on their rights. They could not marry legitimate citizens, and their children were frequently denied inheritance or status. They were vulnerable to political attacks, social slander, and exploitation. Yet many Hetairai carved out remarkable careers, gaining wealth, influence, and respect. They were patrons of the arts, commissioning statues, sponsoring plays, and hosting salons where the greatest minds of the age gathered. Their influence reached into the highest circles of power, sometimes altering the course of politics through their relationships. Phryne, one of the most famous Hetairi, was renowned not only for her unparalleled beauty, but for her generosity and cunning. Stories of her life blended fact and legend. When accused of impiety, a charge that threatened her life, she famously unveiled herself before the judges, her flawless form supposedly a sign of divine favor. The court, moved or dazzled, acquitted her, cementing her place in history. Phryne was also a muse to sculptors like Praxiteles, who immortalized her in marble, blending sensuality with idealized beauty. Her life was a testament to how Hetairai negotiated the fragile balance between power and vulnerability. Callista's relationship with Nicander, a young and ambitious politician, offered a glimpse into the personal dimension of these partnerships. Though their bond was not formalized by marriage, it was profound. Nicander admired Callista's intellect and spirit, while she found in him a protector and companion who valued her beyond her beauty. Their connection was nurtured in evenings spent discussing philosophy, poetry, and politics. Callista challenged Nicander's assumptions, inspiring him to new heights of rhetoric and strategy. Their love was a partnership of equals, a rare and precious thing in their time. In symposia, Hetairi like Callista played vital roles. They were entertainers who sang, danced, and recited poetry, but more importantly, they were facilitators of dialogue, easing tensions and encouraging intellectual exchange. Their presence lent an air of refinement and excitement to gatherings that might otherwise descend into mere debauchery. The city's elite prized their company not just for physical pleasure, but for the cultural enrichment they brought. The ability to navigate complex social nuances, to read and respond to the moods of the room, was a skill many men admired and depended upon. Beyond Athens, the institution of the Hetaira existed in various forms across the Greek world. Cities like Corinth and Thebes had their own traditions of courtesanship, each reflecting local customs and values. In all, the Hetairae were symbols of the intersection of sexuality, art, and power. Yet the pressures they faced were immense. Aging threatened their status. Youth was currency in a society that prized beauty. Many faced loneliness, their relationships often tenuous and precarious. Competition was fierce among Hetairai, with younger women continually entering the field. Many sought to secure their futures through accumulating wealth or forming strategic alliances. Some retired to quieter lives, marrying foreign merchants or investing in property. Others remained in the public eye, mentoring younger women and continuing to influence cultural life. The Hetaire's legacy is complex. They challenge notions of female sexuality and agency, showing that desire and intellect could coexist in ways that unsettled traditional gender norms. Their stories reveal the human longing for connection and respect beyond social roles and constraints. One cool evening, as the city settled into the calm of night, Callista and Nicander wandered through the olive groves outside the city walls. The moon cast silvery light upon the leaves, creating a shimmering canopy above them. They spoke softly of hopes for the future, of fears that lingered beneath their public facades. Callista's laughter, clear and bright, rang out, a sound of defiance against the rigid boundaries of their world. Her life was a testament to the power of love and intellect to carve freedom from constraint. Their story, like that of so many Hetairi, reminds us that love and desire are complex, multifaceted forces, capable of both empowerment and pain, connection and solitude. In the delicate dance of human relationships, the Hetairi were among the most skilled performers, moving gracefully through a world that sought to both exalt and limit them. As Athens slept, the echoes of their voices and laughter lingered in the air, the invisible threads of passion, art, and power that wove through the city's heart, binding its people across time and space. Athens, a city pulsing with life and energy, was about to transform. The usual rhythms of daily life, the measured pace of markets, the solemn deliberations of the assembly, the steady work in workshops would give way to something altogether different, the festival season. Among these festivals, none was quite so anticipated, so rich in paradox and vitality as those honoring Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and ecstatic frenzy. These festivals were more than mere celebrations. They were immersive experiences that wove together the sacred and the sensual, the communal and the personal, the disciplined and the wild. The Dionysia, held annually in the spring, was the grandest of these celebrations. It was a time when the city opened its arms wide, embracing both reverence and revelry. For days, Athenians, from the highest magistrates to humble artisans, participated in rituals, theatrical performances, and feasts that honored the dual nature of life and the gods. The city's streets were alive with color and sound. Processions snaked through the marble colonnades, participants crowned with wreaths of ivy and grape leaves, carrying thyrsi, staffs topped with pine cones and entwined with ivy, that symbolized the power of Dionysus. The air was thick with the scent of crushed grapes and burning incense. Masked performers danced wildly, embodying the god's spirit of transformation and madness. Their laughter and shouts blurred the line between human and divine. Central to the festival were the theatrical competitions held in the open-air theater on the southern slope of the Acropolis. Tragedies and comedies alike explored the deepest questions of existence: fate and free will, love and betrayal, the mortal and the immortal. The plays did not shy away from themes of eroticism and desire, often using mythological tales to reflect the passions and conflicts of everyday life. These dramas were not just entertainment, they were acts of communal catharsis, opportunities for the city to confront its fears and hopes, to celebrate life's pleasures and mourn its losses. The actors, wearing masks and elaborate costumes, brought gods and mortals to life in a dance of storytelling that captivated the audience, drawing them into a shared spiritual experience. Yet beyond the grand public spectacles, the Dionysia also included intimate, private rituals and festivities. These gatherings often took place in the homes of wealthy citizens or secluded groves outside the city. Here, wine flowed more freely and social conventions loosened, allowing participants to explore desire in ways typically constrained by everyday life. One such festival, the Anthesteria, celebrated the new wine's arrival and with it, the renewal of the earth's fertility. Spanning 3 days, the festival combined joy and solemnity, pleasure and reverence. The first day, Pythogia, marked the opening of wine jars, releasing the god's spirit. Families gathered to drink, sing, and welcome the season's blessings. Young men and women mingled openly, their interactions charged with the promise of new relationships and fresh beginnings. The second day, Choose, was known for its playful and sensual atmosphere. Participants engaged in drinking contests and flirtations, often pairing off in games that blended wit, charm, and physical attraction. These interactions were socially significant, reinforcing bonds within the community and allowing expressions of desire that might otherwise be suppressed. On the final day, Chetroi, the tone shifted to the somber. Offerings of cooked grains were made to the dead, acknowledging the cycle of life and death that defined human existence. The dead were believed to walk among the living, and families took care to honor them with food and drink. This mingling of life and death underscored the festival's profound connection to fertility, renewal, and the human condition. Women played essential roles in these festivals, especially through the figure of the priestess. Leading sacred dances and chants, these women embodied goddesses like Demeter and Persephone, whose myths intertwined themes of death, rebirth, and fertility. Their rituals were acts of profound spiritual power and offered moments of female agency in a society that otherwise restricted women's public roles. Erotic art and poetry flourished in this context. Vase paintings depicted scenes of courtship, flirtation, and love, often with playful humor and symbolism. Poets like Anacreon celebrated the joys of wine and love, capturing the bittersweet nature of desire, the fleeting moments of pleasure, and the longing that follows. Erotic symposia, intimate gatherings for conversation and pleasure, were microcosms of the larger festivals. Here, men and their companions engaged in intellectual discourse, music, dance, and sometimes physical intimacy, all framed by ritual and social convention. The symposium was a space where boundaries could be explored and desires expressed within a structured, culturally sanctioned environment. Yet these festivals also reflected the tensions inherent in Greek society's attitudes towards sexuality. While desire was acknowledged and ritualized, social order remained paramount. Excess was feared as a threat to stability, and moral boundaries were carefully maintained even amid celebration. The gods themselves embodied these contradictions. Dionysus was both liberator and destroyer, his influence capable of both joyous release and terrifying chaos. The festivals thus served as social safety valves, allowing the community to confront and integrate its contradictions, pleasure and restraint, chaos and order, life and death, within a sacred framework. Through ritual, drama, and communal experience, the city reaffirmed its values while acknowledging the complexity of human nature. Amidst this vibrant backdrop was the story of Milena, a young woman from an aristocratic family. Usually confined to the secluded quarters of her household, Milena eagerly anticipated the festival season. The Dionysia offered her rare glimpses of freedom and expression. She joined the women's choruses that performed sacred dances, embodying stories of goddesses and heroines, her movements weaving myths into living experience. One moonlit night, as the city celebrated in joyful uproar, Milena met Thales, a sculptor whose passion for beauty was matched only by his deep sensitivity. Their first encounter was serendipitous, a chance meeting in a quiet garden where the festival's noise faded into the distance. Drawn together by shared curiosity and admiration for art and the divine, they began a relationship marked by tenderness and intensity. Thales spoke of the gods as forces within the human soul, while Milena shared her dreams of a world where women might walk freely alongside men, their voices heard and valued. Their evenings were filled with whispered conversations beneath the stars, hands intertwined, hearts open. Their love was a sacred dance, mirroring the festival's themes of transformation and union. In their union, the divine and the mortal met, each reflecting the other's beauty and fragility. Their story became one of many that illustrated how the festivals were not just communal events, but deeply personal journeys of desire, identity, and connection. As the festival drew to a close, the city gradually returned to its daily rhythms. The intoxicating blend of sacred ritual and sensual celebration faded into memory, yet its effects lingered, strengthening bonds, inspiring art, and reminding all that desire, in its many forms, was an essential thread in the fabric of life. Athens, a city alive with the constant hum of life, held many secrets behind the grandeur of its marble temples and bustling agoras. Among these secrets were the whispered tales and hidden passions that unfolded within the sacred precincts, places where the divine and the mortal worlds met in intimate and sometimes scandalous ways. The temples of ancient Greece were far more than mere houses of worship. They were vibrant centers of social, political, and cultural life. Each temple dedicated to a god or goddess served as a focal point for communal identity, a place where prayers were whispered, sacrifices made, and the mysteries of existence contemplated. But these were also places where desire stirred, where the sacred mingled with the sensual, and where love, both celebrated and forbidden, wove itself into the fabric of devotion. The temple of Aphrodite Pandemos, perched on the lower slopes of the Acropolis, was one such sanctuary. Here, worshippers honored Aphrodite, not only as the goddess of beauty and physical love, but as the divine source of all attraction and social harmony. The epithet Pandemos, meaning of all the people, suggested a love that transcended boundaries, uniting city and community through the bonds of affection and desire. Within this temple, the priestesses held positions of profound significance. They were custodians of sacred rites and intermediaries between the goddess and her followers. Yet their roles were multifaceted, blending spiritual leadership with a socially ambiguous status. Unlike the wives and daughters confined to private domestic spaces, these women moved freely in public religious life, commanding respect, yet often existing on the margins of social acceptability. Lysandra was one such priestess. From a young age, she had been dedicated to Aphrodite, raised within the temple's shadow and schooled in its rites. Her beauty was striking, deep, dark eyes, framed by curling locks, a smile that could both soothe and ignite. But it was her intellect and poise that truly set her apart. She knew the ancient hymns and dances. She understood the subtle language of the gods and the people who worshipped them. Her days were filled with the rhythm of ritual, morning prayers, offerings of incense and flowers, guiding worshippers in acts of devotion. But beyond the formal ceremonies, Lysandra understood the temple's deeper mysteries, those of love's power to create and destroy, to bind and liberate. The festival season was approaching, and with it, the heightened energy that filled the temple precinct. The Aphrodisia, a festival dedicated to the goddess, was a time of intense celebration and spiritual renewal. During this time, the boundaries between the sacred and the sensual blurred further as devotees engaged in dances, music, and rites that honored fertility, passion, and the mysteries of human connection. It was in this charged atmosphere that Lysandra first noticed Damon. A young scholar from a prominent family, Damon came to the temple seeking knowledge. His fascination with philosophy and theology had drawn him to the scrolls and teachings preserved within the temple's sanctuary. But there was more than mere scholarship in his visits. His gaze lingered on Lysandra longer than propriety dictated, his presence charged with a mix of respect and yearning. Their first conversation happened by chance in the temple's library, a quiet space lined with scrolls and lit by flickering oil lamps. Damon was reading a treatise on the nature of love and the divine, struggling with questions that stirred both his mind and heart. "You seem troubled," Lysandra said softly, stepping into the light. "May I offer assistance?" Surprised, yet intrigued, Damon welcomed her presence. What began as a scholarly exchange soon blossomed into deeper discussions about the gods, the mysteries of desire, and the delicate balance between duty and passion. Lysandra spoke of Aphrodite's many aspects: the wild and the tame, the public and the private, the sacred and the profane. Damon listened, captivated by her knowledge and the fire behind her calm exterior. As days turned to weeks, their meetings became more frequent and less formal. In the temple gardens, under the shade of olive trees heavy with ripe fruit, they shared stories and dreams. Damon revealed his longing for a love that transcended mere physical attraction, a connection that united soul and body. Lysandra, in turn, confided her fears, the dangers of falling for a mortal in a role bound by divine law. Their relationship unfolded cautiously, like a delicate dance. Every glance, every touch, was measured against the risks they faced. The temple elders watched closely, their suspicion a silent barrier. To be caught in an improper liaison could mean disgrace, exile, or worse. Yet love, once kindled, defied the strictest rules. In stolen moments, Lysandra and Damon found sanctuary in each other's arms, their passion both a refuge and a rebellion. They moved between shadows and light, between sacred rites and private embraces, embodying the very contradictions that defined their world. Their story was not unique. Across the Greek world, sacred spaces often became stages for complex expressions of love and desire. The practice of sacred prostitution, though controversial, was one such expression. In temples dedicated to Aphrodite, especially in Corinth, hierodules, sacred servants, offered their bodies in ritualized acts believed to honor the goddess and channel her fertility. This was not mere decadence, but a spiritual act, a way of participating in the divine cycle of life and renewal. Worshippers believed that by engaging in these rites, they received blessings and protection, linking their earthly desires with celestial forces. However, the practice was fraught with ambiguity. While some viewed it as a sacred tradition, others criticized it as moral corruption. Philosophers debated its place in society, and laws fluctuated between regulation and prohibition. The tension between desire and decorum was reflected in Greek mythology. Stories of gods and mortals were filled with passion, jealousy, and transformation. Aphrodite herself was known for her numerous love affairs, both with gods like Ares and mortals such as Anchises. Her narrative illustrated love's power to enchant and complicate lives. The tragic tale of Phaedra, who fell hopelessly in love with her stepson, Hippolytus, ended in heartbreak and death, a cautionary story of forbidden desire and its consequences. Such myths served not only to entertain, but to explore the moral and emotional complexities surrounding love and passion. Within daily life, the temple's influence extended into social customs and personal relationships. Priests and priestesses facilitated marriages, blessed unions, and counseled lovers. Festivals provided socially sanctioned opportunities for courtship and expression of desire. Lysandra and Damon's love, unfolding amidst these layers of meaning, reflected the delicate interplay of freedom and restraint. Their bond challenged societal norms, but also honored the sacred traditions that shaped their identities. Their relationship was tested by jealousy, gossip, and the ever-present threat of discovery. Yet it endured, growing stronger through shared belief and mutual respect. One evening, as the temple candles flickered and the city slept, Lysandra and Damon met in a hidden alcove beneath the statue of Aphrodite. The scent of jasmine filled the air, mingling with the faint sound of distant prayers. They spoke of their hopes, their fears, and their dreams for a future where love could be free from judgment. Their hands clasped, hearts intertwined, they vowed to honor both their passion and their duties, to the goddess, to society, and to each other. In that sacred moment, the boundaries between the mortal and divine, the forbidden and the blessed, dissolved. Their love became a prayer, a living testament to the enduring power of desire and devotion. The sun had long dipped beneath the horizon, leaving Athens cloaked in a soft twilight that painted its marble temples and stone houses with a gentle glow. The city's streets, once bustling with the day's commerce and politics, now quieted, save for the murmurs of evening conversations and the occasional laughter drifting from open windows. But within the walls of one grand home, nestled near the foot of the Acropolis, the night was just beginning. Callias, an affluent Athenian of noble birth and generous spirit, prepared to host a symposium, a gathering sacred to both mind and body. A carefully crafted ritual where philosophy, poetry, music, and pleasure mingled in harmonious celebration. His household bustled with servants, lighting oil lamps, arranging cushions and couches, and preparing amphorae filled with the season's finest wine. The air was rich with the scent of burning cedarwood incense and fresh flowers. Hyacinths and roses laid delicately on low tables. The symposium was more than a mere drinking party. It was an institution, central to the social and intellectual life of Athens. Here, friendships were forged, alliances cemented, and ideas exchanged in an atmosphere charged with both civility and uninhibited joy. Participation was typically restricted to male citizens of status, but within this exclusivity, an intricate dance of social interaction unfolded, one where intellect and desire coexisted, intertwined. As guests arrived, Callias greeted each with warmth and a knowing smile, offering them seats on plush cushions arranged around the room. Among those attending were Philemon, a seasoned general famed for his courage and strategic mind. Theon, a young and ambitious philosopher whose eyes gleamed with curiosity, and Nicostratos, a poet whose verses had already begun to stir the hearts of Athens' literary circles. Interspersed among the men were the Hetairae, companions prized not only for their beauty, but also for their intellect and artistry. These women, often educated beyond their station, were masters of conversation, music, and the subtle arts of companionship. Tonight, the lyre's delicate strings were coaxed by Dione, a hetaira whose melodies captured the full spectrum of human emotion, from melancholic longing to ecstatic joy. The evening opened with a solemn libation to Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and ecstatic frenzy. A golden cup, filled with deep red wine, was raised high, the gathered voices joining in a prayer. O Dionysus, grant us your blessing. May wine loosen our tongues. may wisdom guide our hearts, and may joy reign among us tonight. The first cups were passed, filled with sweet, honeyed wine, diluted with water to temper its strength. Conversation ignited, beginning with politics and philosophy, the weighty matters that occupied the minds of Athens' elite. Theon, eager to impress, spoke of Socratic dialectics, questioning the nature of justice and virtue, while Philemon recounted tales from distant battlefields, his voice rich with experience. Yet the symposium was not solely an arena for debate. As wine warmed their spirits, the tone softened, shifting toward poetry and storytelling. Nicostratos recited verses extolling the beauty of Aphrodite and the thrills of love, his words painting vivid scenes of moonlit trysts and whispered promises. Dione's lyre rose in harmony, the notes weaving through the room like silken threads. Her music was a language itself, expressing what words could only hint at: the tender brush of a hand, the electric spark of a glance, the aching sweetness of desire. In this enchanted space, the social order wavered. Hetairai and citizens engaged as intellectual equals. The barriers of class and gender momentarily softened. Laughter sparkled alongside thoughtful reflection. The men challenged each other with riddles and playful jests, their wit sharpened by wine and competition. Callias watched the scene with satisfaction. For him, the symposium was sacred, a microcosm of Athens itself, where the highest ideals of democracy, friendship, and culture coalesced with the fundamental human need for connection and pleasure. As the night deepened, conversations turned toward love, its virtues and dangers, its transformative power, and its capacity to wound. Theon posed a question that drew the group into earnest contemplation. Is love a divine madness or a path to wisdom? Philemon argued for love's power to inspire courage and greatness, recounting how the thought of his beloved had steeled his resolve in battle. Nicostratos, ever the poet, suggested love was both torment and bliss, a dual force that could break hearts even as it lifted souls. Dion added a softer voice, reminding them that love's greatest gift was its ability to open the self to another, to create bonds that transcended the mundane. Her words resonated deeply, and the room fell into a reflective silence. The night's pleasures soon extended beyond discourse. The symposiarch, the appointed master of ceremonies, often Callias himself, guided the gathering through the rituals of the symposium. More wine was brought forth, carefully diluted, to prolong the evening's revels without leading to chaos. The Kottabos game commenced, a favorite pastime wherein participants flung the dregs of their wine at a target. The sound of splashing met with cheers and playful teasing. This lively contest blended skill, humor, and social bonding, offering moments of light-hearted competition. Amidst the games and laughter, the Hetairai moved gracefully among the guests, offering their company, engaging in whispered conversations, and, for some, sharing intimate embraces. Unlike the wives and daughters relegated to the domestic sphere, Hetairai enjoyed relative freedom, their status tied to their charm, education, and ability to navigate these complex social worlds. Dione approached Callias, her eyes sparkling with mischief and warmth. Their dialogue flowed effortlessly, discussing music, philosophy, and personal dreams. She spoke of how melodies could heal sorrow and ignite passion, while he shared his hopes for Athens, a city where wisdom and justice might flourish in harmony. Their connection was emblematic of the symposium's essence, a meeting of minds and hearts, a celebration of life's full spectrum. Yet beneath the conviviality, the symposium revealed deeper social truths. The exclusion of women, except for Hetairai, highlighted the limitations imposed by Athenian patriarchy. Relationships formed here were often steeped in power dynamics, where age, status, and mentorship shaped interactions, especially in the context of same-sex relationships that were common and culturally nuanced. The concept of paiderastia, or the socially acknowledged relationship between an adult man and a younger male, was woven into the fabric of symposium culture. These bonds were educational and affectionate, with older partners guiding youth in social, intellectual, and sometimes erotic development. However, they were also circumscribed by ethical expectations, with consent and social status playing critical roles. As the night gave way to early morning, voices softened and movements slowed. Guests reclined, some slipping away for rest, others lingering in quiet conversation or tender embraces. The lamps burned low, shadows dancing on walls adorned with scenes from mythology, depictions of gods and heroes whose loves and battles echoed the passions unfolding in this very room. When dawn's first light crept through windows, the symposium was over. The guests departed into a city awakening to new hopes and challenges, their spirits lifted by the night's communion. Callias, weary but fulfilled, reflected on the symposium's enduring importance. It was more than an evening of indulgence. It was a crucible where friendship, love, intellect, and pleasure melded, shaping the lives of those who participated and, by extension, the fate of Athens itself. In the symposia of ancient Greece, the human experience was celebrated in its fullest complexity. Here, the sacred and the sensual danced together, weaving a tapestry of connection that transcended time. The dawn broke softly over Athens, gilding the city's ancient stones with the first gentle rays of sunlight. The Acropolis stood majestic against the pale sky, its temples gleaming like monuments not only to gods but to the passions and dreams of generations long past. The city awoke slowly, stirring with the familiar sounds of merchants setting up stalls, children playing in the streets, and philosophers gathering in the agora to discuss the nature of existence. Yet beneath the surface of this bustling life lay the deep, enduring legacy of something more elusive, the legacy of desire. For centuries, the people of Greece had lived lives rich with complexity, weaving the sacred and the sensual into a vibrant cultural tapestry that celebrated not only the divine, but the deeply human. It was a culture that recognized the many faces of love, desire, and intimacy, embracing them as vital threads in the fabric of society and the soul. Lysandra and Damon's story had become one of the many whispered among the Athenians. A tale of love forged in the shadow of the gods, tested by societal boundaries, and ultimately transcendent in its quiet, enduring strength. Their love was a mirror reflecting the contradictions and beauty that defined ancient Greek life, a world where passion was both celebrated and constrained, where sacred rites mingled with secret embraces, and where the search for connection was a spiritual as well as earthly quest. As the city moved forward into a new day, so too did the memory of the festivals that had once filled its streets with music, dance, and the wild joy of Dionysian revelry. These celebrations were more than mere entertainment. They were communal rituals that connected the people to the cycles of nature, the gods, and to one another. The laughter and song of those times echoed still in the hearts of those who remembered, inspiring art, poetry, and philosophy. Greek drama had immortalized these themes, offering audiences glimpses into the complexities of love and desire through the tragic and comic tales of gods and mortals. Playwrights such as Euripides and Aristophanes explored the depths of human emotion, laying bare the joys and pains of passion, the tensions between reason and impulse, and the fragile balance between order and chaos. The symposium, the cherished gathering where wine flowed and ideas blossomed, was a microcosm of this culture. It was here that men and their companions explored not only philosophy and politics, but also the intimate bonds of friendship and love. The blending of intellect and sensuality in these gatherings illustrated the Greeks' profound understanding of the human experience as a whole, rejecting narrow distinctions between body and mind. The role of women in this narrative was as complex as it was vital. While the public sphere often excluded them, women found agency in religious life as priestesses and participants in sacred rituals. Hetairai, with their education and social skills, occupied a unique space, bridging worlds and challenging social norms. Their stories added layers of nuance to the understanding of gender and sexuality in ancient Greece. Sacred prostitution, with its ritualized acts performed in honor of gods like Aphrodite, further complicated modern perceptions. Far from simple moral judgments, these practices revealed a culture that saw sexuality as intertwined with spirituality, fertility, and community well-being. The rituals were an expression of humanity's deep need to connect with forces beyond itself through the body's language. The myths that Greeks told, stories of gods who loved, betrayed, transformed, and punished, were not merely entertainment, but moral and philosophical explorations. They captured the contradictions of love, its capacity to inspire greatness and bring ruin, its beauty and its danger, its capacity to heal and to wound. Through these narratives, the Greeks taught that love was a divine madness, a force both feared and revered. In their daily lives, Athenians navigated a world where personal desire intersected with social expectation. Marriages were often arranged for political alliance and family continuity, but love and attraction found expression in countless other ways, through symposia, festivals, poetry, and private moments of tenderness and passion. The legacy of Greek sexuality and desire extended far beyond their own time. Their art, literature, and philosophy laid foundations that would influence cultures across centuries and continents. The openness with which they approached human intimacy challenged future generations to reconsider the boundaries of love and morality. Yet the Greeks themselves were aware of the tensions inherent in their culture. They recognized that desire could be a source of both harmony and disruption. The festivals and rituals provided a structured way to explore and contain these powerful emotions, ensuring that the vitality of life was balanced with social order. Lysandra and Damon's enduring love was emblematic of this delicate balance. Their story, passed down through whispered conversations and private letters, became a symbol of hope, that passion could coexist with duty, that love could flourish even in the face of adversity, and that human connection was a sacred gift. As Athens grew and changed, the world around it shifted. New powers rose, new philosophies emerged, and the gods of old gave way to new beliefs. Yet the echoes of ancient Greece's celebration of desire remained, woven into the very fabric of Western culture. In the arts, painters and sculptors continued to explore the human form, capturing its beauty and emotion with reverence and skill. Writers and philosophers debated the nature of love and ethics, drawing on the rich heritage left by their ancestors. Even today, the story of ancient Greece's approach to sexuality offers insight and inspiration. It reminds us that love is complex and multifaceted, that it cannot be confined to simple definitions or rules. It teaches that desire is both a personal journey and a communal experience, tied to the deepest questions of identity and belonging. In quiet moments, When the bustle of modern life fades, we might imagine the flicker of candlelight in an ancient Athenian home, the soft strains of a lyre, the whispered conversations of lovers beneath olive trees. We might hear the echoes of laughter from symposia, feel the pulse of drums in Dionysian dances, and glimpse the glint of passion in a poet's eyes. These are the timeless gifts of the Greeks, the legacy of desire that continues to inspire, challenge, and enrich the human spirit. And so, beneath the towering columns of marble and the endless sky of the Mediterranean, the dance of love and life continues, an eternal celebration of our shared humanity.